was your Mother's Day yesterday?
You want this on recording?
I don't know.
Yeah, but what'd you do for yourself?
I actually.
Oh, wait, I saw your post.
Did you see it? Yeah, I went to a yoga class that was amazing, and they had at this yoga studio I go to. Sometimes they do free yoga for Mother's Day for all the moms.
Oh, nice.
And so I got a free yoga class, and I with my friend Shalom, and Shalom. He's an amazing sound healer. I'm trying to get him on the show. Actually, he's incredible. But yeah, I did that. Liam and I went for like a short hike that morning. Like we have this, I didn't take you to Oaks Bottom Wildlife Refuge, but
we didn't have enough time.
No, but next time you come, I'll take you. It's a really nice little hike that we have across the street. And then let's see, what else did I do? They took me out to dinner. I still haven't even heard about how your class was yet. So.
Oh yeah,
we had a lot to catch up on, I guess, right?
Okay, yeah. So the class, we'll do this real quick. Amazing. The tailbone stuff and all that, the tongue connected to the tail, like it is just seriously, the tongue dysfunctions can have relations to the pelvic floor dysfunction.
Oh, wow.
Instability and all the sensory input that goes through the vagus nerve, and how they call it interoception, where you can feel the inside of you out of balance. So you may regulate outward. So you might be so out here all the time because you can't focus within you here, because this is a dysfunction. And like the jaw has a lot to do with the cranial nerves that associate with it. I mean, there's just like so many things. Like one of the things, I was talking to my friend that took the other course, she didn't take this one.
Mm-hmm.
And like literally, like the coach that I was telling you about, the voice coach guy,
mm-hmm.
I always thought I had my tongue on the roof of the mouth. Like I thought when they said, do you have your tongue on your roof of your mouth? I said, yeah, I do. I totally always did.
Right.
No. I had part of my tongue, the tip of my tongue, like here, right here, right?
Oh, you just had the tip of your tongue, you're saying, on your, that's it.
But maybe the mid part of it, but the whole backside's not going up.
Oh, so right. Yeah.
Your whole tongue should like vacuum up onto the palate of your on the your roof of your palate.
Mm-hmm.
He, like when I was talking to him, let's see, I don't know if you can see this, but I have my vomer, which is at the top of the roof of the mouth.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I see that.
That's fallen, right? That's not supposed to like officially be like that.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know what it's from. Like, I don't know if it was from birth, it was from injury, or whatever. It's just felt, I've always had that. Like, I never noticed I didn't have that. And when I was working with one of the partners at the workshop, she's like doing this drill we had to do to get the tongue completely up there. And she's like, I can't breathe. And I'm like, okay. Well, she runs over and talks to the voice coach. The voice coach helps her. She's like, comes back and tells us what he does. And she's like, yeah, my vomer dropped. And she showed me, and I'm like, oh, I got the same thing. I never knew. Out of all the anatomy classes, out of all the cranial sacral, I never got told that was.
I can't believe they didn't talk about that craniosacral.
Yeah. And I don't even remember my orthodontist who gave me a mouthpiece, and he literally was like, your tongue is pushing in the front of your teeth. So that's why he gave me this like little mouthpiece. It has this little like it stuck out prongs.
Yeah.
So that your tongue would go to your roof of your mouth, not on your teeth.
Right.
And so that was where I learned, tongue on the roof of your mouth. Well, the thing is that I wasn't ever touching that ridge part where the vomer came back, because maybe it's an injury. I don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
But I literally was like, I got to talk to that voice coach. And I walked over and he told me a couple of things to do. And it literally, like, once he showed me how to do it, my tongue just floated and I didn't want to bring it off. Like, it was just like, oh,
wow,
feels amazing. And like, so there's these practices that you can do to make sure you're completely getting like I told this one woman, she's like, well, she doesn't have the vomer issue, right? But she says she feels like she's missing from, she's got the top, she's got the back, but there's a part missing here.
Okay. Like a
In the middle.
space.
Yeah. Like there's like a gap. And so I told her, and she's like, okay, let me practice that. But like, there's a whole other kind of reasons, because the tongue is associated with these certain cranial nerves.
Mm-hmm.
Like the front part is 5 to 7, the back part's 10 and 9, and the parts of 11. And those have a lot to do with the vagus nerve. It has a lot to do with swallowing, whether you can swallow correctly, affects the pelvic floor, midline stability. What we talked about in terms of, he told me, you know, because I was having cranial issues on 5 and parts of my issue with my inner ear. I was telling you about that part.
Mm-hmm.
I did tell you that part, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because the flight was bothering me. That the right ear has a lot to do with voice, in doing hearing and voice, like podcast and radio and stuff like that, because where the hearing and how it works. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. Like,
yeah.
And he's like, it's amazing that you're having these issues and you do this podcast. And I'm like, yeah, it totally is.
He was saying basically that's
like I need to
like
work
a
on that.
handicap or something when it comes to podcasting. Like it, yeah.
And then how you pronounce things and how you
Oh, right. Like
and how
hearing,
you
like
speak.
reflect, like if you're saying something and it comes back to you, what you're saying, like getting
No,
the
like
word out.
pronunciation,
Yeah, right,
and
right.
how, like we talk about, we don't
Like
want to be
finishing the
umming, we
word
don't,
you're saying. Yeah.
and having a mental clarity of when you're speaking, and in, you know, not going off into a direction of external processing, as John, you know, would talk about. But
Mm-hmm.
it's more that the brain is connecting and firing, and everything is working through the jaw, through the ear, through the eye. All
Yeah.
that stuff has to communicate together. So when you're talking on the radio or talking on the whatever, you can communicate through all that in the brainstem and everything. So it was fascinating to meet the
That
guy.
is. That's
And that's
really
why
fascinating. Yeah.
and there's a little bit of understanding why certain things need to be maintained. And what we didn't get was the science behind the biology, like the biology part about what was going on to us, like cellular respiration. No one really understands it unless you are in a science background, because
Right.
it doesn't get talked about in the gym. Oh, I'm cellular respirating today, you know, like, or, you know,
Yeah. It's
I'm
true.
oxidizing instead of fatty acid, you know.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
people understood like what that means, okay, I produce more CO2.
Mm-hmm.
So I produce more energy on a less cost basis. I actually produce, I think it's 36 ATPs versus the other one that I can't remember now how
I don't
many
know.
fatty acids. But the basis is I get more for my money when
Mm-hmm.
I take it in. It's like buying
Yeah.
organic, right? We buy
Right.
organic. We kind of work in that, you know, it's worth the value now because it's supposed to come through. Now, we don't know everything we get is quality, but the main thing is we know what we're getting is going to serve us the way we want to be, like, you know, it's going to feel good. We know when a food goes in us and it makes us feel really good, or a food that goes in us and makes us feel really crappy.
Right. And I think that you can indicate that through certain physiological feedback mechanisms that, like, we're going to talk about today. And then we're going to also share with you guys tools on how you can actually record your results from your physiological feedback and see it as a pattern, and kind of compare the patterns, and then use that for yourself so that you can make tweaks in your food that you're intaking, or certain patterns of stress that you're in your life, and that kind of thing. So it's going to be really interesting. And these are things that we actually teach our clients on a one-on-one basis. And we wanted to share this information with everybody, just give everybody kind of a broad stroke idea of how we help people with this, and why we help people with these kinds of tools, because a lot of this stuff is helping you get to know your body better, and everybody has your own unique physiology, and you really need to get to know that yourself, because no one really can do that for you. No one can say, you know, you have to experience it and record it and then look at the patterns. And we of course coach and help guide people through that process. But today we're going to share those tools with you so that you can try it. And if you feel free to head over to our Facebook group or and ask us questions after today's show if you have any questions about some of the tools that we share with you. I just wanted to explain, a little bit about the thyroid. I wanted to talk about because it really starts with the thyroid. Any kind of weight loss issues that people are going to have really have to do with the thyroid and how you're actually converting your cholesterol into steroid hormones, as well as you're converting the T4 to T3. And I'll kind of just give everybody a little explanation of what those are too, in case you don't know. One thing I did want to mention is I was listening to an interview with Ray Peat not too long ago, and I'll reference that show to this show actually. He basically mentioned since estrogen inhibits the activity of the thyroid, women are about 5 to 10 times more likely than men to have thyroid issues. So that's why we're talking about this today, because if you're a woman, most likely you've had some experience with your thyroid that is in the hypothyroid realm or maybe the hyperthyroid realm. The thyroid, first of all, is this gland that's like right in the front of the throat. It looks like a butterfly. And if you're watching me, you can kind of see me point that area out. And it secretes a combination of two hormones. It's about 1/3 T3, tridothyroxine, I think is how you pronounce it. And that's the active thyroid hormone, and about 2/3 T4 thyroxine, which is a storage hormone. So T4 can be turned into T3 in the tissues, mainly in the liver. And so 75% hormonal conversion is done in the liver. So really taking care of your liver and making sure it functions well, which we've talked about in the past, is really crucial. And that's why we talk about it so much. Helping the liver will actually help you regulate your thyroid function.
What we don't pay attention to is that our liver does pretty much everything. If you can think of like how often things have to go through the liver to just be processed through your whole body, it is the gatekeeper, as they call it.
Absolutely. So, and women have smaller livers, generally speaking, than men. Women have more estrogen.
Smaller and based of functioning, like in terms
right.
of.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, not size.
I don't think it's the size as much as it is the functionality of it all. I haven't got a clarity on that, because I used to say it myself.
Yeah.
We had smaller livers, but I was kind of looking for a better understanding of what that means, because I'm a tall woman. I probably have a bigger liver than you do.
You probably do. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're, a smaller man versus a larger woman, I can't see that being the reason for why, I think it's how they functionality.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of the estrogen. I think because that part of it keeps the liver always having to work a little harder is how I see it now. But, we can clarify that later if we want.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because I kind of wondered about that too. And it's a very general statement, and I think in some ways.
Yeah, and I don't want to go down the comparison lane, I don't want to sit there and think
my liver's bigger than your liver.
Yeah, and men's livers are better than women's. Like,
yeah,
come on,
whatever.
What are we talking about?
That is just kind of going down a road you probably don't want to go down.
No, we don't want to do that.
So one thing I did want to mention is T3. I just want to talk a little bit about T3 because it's important because a lot of people will get prescribed T4, and it actually makes things worse and not better, because it's not about so much the T4, because that's what stores the T3. It's really about being able to convert the T4 to the T3. And so because the T3 controls the efficiency of the body's oxidative metabolism, which actually means the rate in which the cells use oxygen to turn the food we eat into CO2, water, heat, and energy.
Mm-hmm. Which we were just talking about in terms of that's the oxidative mechanism. I get more ATPs, I create more CO2, and that's why carbs are good. And to really reemphasize why T4 isn't the best thing to be taking if you have issues with your thyroid is because, and I got a little bit more clear on this, was that it's used to make reverse T3, which then actually inhibits T3 So if you want to get more T3, because that's what's helping the mechanism better, increasing T4 is actually going to inhibit the T3 through making too much reverse T3.
Right.
And
And
that's
can
why
you explain a little bit what reverse T3 is?
is the inactive form of thyroid hormone. Is the hormone produced
Right.
by T3. So if you start, it's like
It's
taking a
like
piece.
saving it, kind of.
It's actually taking the inactive part of the T3, which is like if I'm trying to create T3, which is where I need energy and what you just talked about, creating more oxidative mechanism
Mm-hmm.
easier. Then if I am, it's like I'm taking out the part that I really need, because I'm actually building so much on the other side. I've just taken a whole bunch of T4. It is inhibiting the creation of T3. So if I want to get T3, I need to be taking T3, not taking it.
What I've learned too is it sounds like if you take like a thyroid supplement, like a thyroid glandular, that could be.
Yeah, it's a mix, right? It's
Yeah.
T3, T4.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's regulated better, because if you take T3 and you have low cholesterol, you can burn out your thyroid in a different direction. Because you're producing so much T3, then the body won't let you build it through yourself. It's saying, "Oh, I've got enough. I don't need any
All
more."
right. Right.
And so, first one would be, okay, I take T4. T4 actually is also inhibiting the production of T3, which is where I really need to get my thyroid and have make more of. But then if you take too much T3, you then cause the reverse of the same thing. I can't make it because the body is already getting so much, and I don't have enough to produce it myself. So you have to find the balance based on what you can do. Like like I said, if you don't have enough cholesterol, that means the body doesn't have enough energy to make it itself. It's coming in from a different direction. So it's like, all of it's important, but you got to find what works for you based on what we like to use is the temperature and pulse. If we could, we would do the how to test your oxygen you breathe in and how you CO2 you exhale, but that's a big test and no one really has the money for that. So we use the next best thing, and temperature and pulse is going to tell you what's happening to your body. And because the temperature reduces, that means a part of you is actually having uh, it's actually like an oven not working, to
Right.
reframe it.
So and so there goes the issue with weight loss, right? So if we're not actually converting the thyroid hormone, the T4 to T3, and you're not actually using, being able to produce energy, because the T3 hormone is the basis for your body structure and your function, then that's really where we need to go. So like you said, that's why we go to the physiological feedback tools, which are temperature and pulse.
And the reason why is because, like, hyperthyroid people who have what we call low tissue metabolism means that you have high adrenaline. I mean, mainly you're living off of stress hormones, and that's heating your body because it's a forced heat. It's your survival mechanism. And what it's saying is the body is registering you as a low temperature body. That means the cellular energy it has is weak. It cannot keep you warm. That's why you have
Right.
cold hands, cold feet. That's why different versions of why people have gut issues, because food and all that is being not processed the way it can be in a healthier heated body. And then what we want to work on is really finding that if you're overweight, you need to take your temperature in a very cool temperature regulation, not something warm, not under a heated pad or anything like
Right.
that, because you're really not getting that. And the subcutaneous fat from being overweight can actually influence the temperature. So that's why we ask people to take their temperature and pulse throughout the day too, because not only will it help you find out what's happening to your body as you go on in the day and as the stress hormones are fluctuating, because you have more in the morning and it slows down and then it reverses in the night. So what happens is then your temperature will start to drop throughout the day. And what then goes on is then, okay, by the time you go to bed, you're frozen, you're freezing, you are in temperatures that you don't sleep well, because your body is afraid you're going to die at night, because it's such a stressful time with no light, because light is actually what helps the cellular mechanism grow. So I actually listened to Ray Peat talk about this, or I read it in his Generative Energy book. And he said, he talks about how the reason why the winter months are so hard on us is because the light influence that we get in the summer is where the body cleans up all the, I don't want to say, maybe it is the more like dead cells, the parts that are mutant cells, or and
Okay.
helps recycle things out. So that's why in the summertime you feel so much better. The light is more prevalent, your body is working on an easier basis of in terms of the science we talk about, and then you basically get a feeling of regeneration. It's the part of the regeneration. So that's where a lot of people might die in the winter months, because they don't have enough energy to
Heat the
help
body.
keep the
Yeah.
body. And so summer is always the change of literally our cellular skin, I would think, in
Yeah.
terms of how it needs to clean up the dead cells and work on itself and try to rebuild itself. So that's that's the reason why we also talk about light therapy as important.
And, I know that also hypothyroid people generally feel better in the summertime too, because they don't have to use the extra energy to heat the body. It's interesting because, where did that book go? Oh, there's a book I was kind of been like looking at here and there, but basically this is called Hope for Hypoglycemia, and it's actually written by basically who created the temperature and pulse test that we're talking about, Dr. Broda Barnes, and he also wrote a book called Hypothyroidism and Unsuspected Illness. So basically what he discovered was measuring basal body temperature and the pulse gives you information and feedback about the efficiency and strength of your metabolic function. And these measurements give us direct feedback on how well your body is able to heat itself and transport oxygen and nutrients to the cells in your body, like Maya was just talking about. He was an MD, and I'm not sure what year. It was a while
20?
back, 20s. Yeah, but he did write a book. This was like from the 70s, I think, actually. Maybe.
Why don't you share the book again and just
Okay. 79 is the copyright. But yeah, this is it's a really old book. I'll reference it here too, but I think you can find it on Amazon pretty easily. It's a used book, obviously. But so he measured body temperature in people to determine what he called subclinical hypothyroidism, which doesn't show up in standard blood chemistry tests, and it still doesn't. And people are still being tested with blood tests and telling them they're normal. But the basic function of the thyroid is its ability to regulate the metabolic furnace of the body to create heat or control temperature, like we talked about. But like we said, the basal body temperature originated from Dr. Broda Barnes when he discovered that hypothyroidism was being severely underdiagnosed in the medical community. And he later developed a diagnostic test that was intended for thyroid function. It became known as the Barnes basal temperature test, and that's what we use. Because everybody can use this test. This is not something that you have to pay for. It's really accessible to everybody, and it gives you so much great information. Plus, on top of that, it gives you great information about yourself, about your own physiology, which everybody really should know. You should know how your body's functioning. You shouldn't have to go always to someone to tell you about that. Yeah. So do you want to add anything to that before we kind of get into what it means and how to use it and all that?
We could talk about this. So a lot of times measuring your temperature might be an arm going into the arm, under the armpit,
Oh, yeah.
or you're taking your eardrum, or you can take it orally to the mouth. And mainly is because each of those areas are going to show a different rate, a temperature rate. Like I said about the subcutaneous fat could influence your reading. When you start to get a better knowing of what is your best temperature reading, you would want to do it consistently over, a week or so, because it gives you enough time to kind of know what's consistent for you at that time.
Definitely. And I usually have, and I do this myself too, I usually have people use a digital thermometer orally. And I do
Yes.
that too. I find that's the best reading, really.
Yeah, and it's fast, and people are going to look for fast before they look for anything else. But if you want to get technical, you could do like now they have the ones where you can just swipe the forehead, and
Oh, are those very
yeah.
accurate?
I think I asked Dr. Pete, and he thinks that they are. I don't
Okay.
know.
Interesting. Yeah, I've seen the people like nurses use that, and
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed by that. It's like
huh,
Star Trek,
it is very
Trekish.
high tech.
The
Um,
eardrum was pretty impressive, but now it's,
yeah.
you just zip, barcode yourself. I guess another thing is, like one of the things about why the temperature and pulse throughout the day is also because of the hormone fluctuations, like cortisol in the morning, increased serotonin in the mid-afternoon, then histamine at night can influence your day, and how the stresses that come through the day can cause all those to increase through the day. So you want to know what you're kind of living off of. Are you living off of metabolism that is healthy, or are you living off of stress hormones and they're masking your temperature? Because the temperature can
Yes.
result as being a positive high, but once you start to take the pulse, or you start to eat a little bit differently with more carbs and more saturated fats and less polyunsaturated fats, your body will start to regulate itself based on the energy metabolism versus the stress hormones, and then your temperature might drop. And with that, you might really uncover where your temperature really is, and how from there you will start to increase your temperature. And wanted to talk a little bit about what would happen after a meal, what potentially you might see when you're eating breakfast, if your temperature is rising or if it's falling, how that could be a part of your meal. That might be, maybe your meal was good, maybe your meal good for you, and why it's important to know the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like it kind of sounds kind of crazy, like what are we talking about? But really, I think this is like amazing information. And really, when you look at it, when you have your food log, and you have your temperature and pulse readings, your initial ones, and then you do the other ones for about 14 days, a week to 14 days, and then you can start to see a pattern of what's working for you, what's not. When you see your temperature and your pulse, and we're going to give you a little bit more information about maybe what some of those readings could mean, but it's really going to give you invaluable information. I mean, it's about your own body and what it's going to respond to, and actually how much energy you really need, how many calories you actually really require throughout the day. And that's we're going to, yeah, right. Because like a lot of people that I've worked with actually aren't eating enough calories. And when we've upped their calories and they can see it, they can see their temperature and pulse going up as they do that. They feel better, their mood's better. They have more energy, they recover better. Yeah.
Yeah, and you talked about the basal temperature with Berta Barnes.
Yeah.
There's we talk about this in fitness, and you can talk to any personal trainer talking about your basal metabolic rate. Like you get a weight, or you do some kind of skin fold, or you do what they have now as STIQ scans, where it scans you and weighs you at the same time, and then tells you your percentage of body fat and versus lean mass. And what it's saying is like there's an absolute base of calories that you have to live based on your body and how your body is formed. And then everything else is going to, the other calories on top of that, you increase because you have to have more because of all the activities that you want to do or the stress that you have in your life. But most people think, I'm going to live off of 1,200 calories and that's going to be good. No, what
That's
that's
not.
that doesn't get you to a place of like breathing and walking around or getting up in the morning. Like those
Well, and then they're like, why isn't my injury? Why do I still have this injury? Why?
Why can't I lose weight?
Yeah,
Because you're
exactly.
under eating. Now, if you tell someone who's been rigidly,
is that what you're trying to say?
Never mind. I'm not going to say it.
Who's rigid?
Just cut that out. I'm trying to say religiously.
Oh, religiously. That's a mouthful. Yeah,
it is a mouthful. What my ear and my cranial nerves not working.
Right.
Reset myself.
At least now you know what's going on, right? I'm just kidding with you.
Yeah, I know, right? Something went off.
Yeah.
I got to get back into most people who believe like this calorie in, calorie out is taking a simplification to calorie burning. Like you could say that if you made sure your basal metabolism rate is consistently being fed, and then anything on top of that, you could say, yeah, I burned this much calories based off of how many calories I ate today. But most people are starting from zero and saying, oh, let me say in and out, I've gotten this many calories and I then had this much, excess exercise or this much stress. And so that's supposed to contain that whole paradigm of calories in and out. No, that basal part is for your brain to work, your heart to run, your body to do its normal functions,
your brain to function too, right? I mean, or is that extra? I mean,
that's
some of it
extra. Yeah, because right. You think about when you wake up and what it takes to even read something or do something, the glucose directly through the eyes, all of it. Like the brain itself needs a lot of energy, and it needs simple energy. And so that's where people get lost, is because you don't really understand that you got to have more calories, that you have to perform like an athlete. You have to have enough calories that sustain you throughout the day. And that's where we also really kind of reiterate, it's really important to know your frequency, the timing, and what's going on in terms of what suits your body at certain times of day through your stresses through the day. So if you know that you can't sit and have a meal, you're going to have to figure out other things that are going to sustain you, give you that feeling that you've got enough calories and you can do things with function, that your brain is working, not living off of caffeine, not living off of, whatever to promote clarity. These things are there. It's just how much you're taking a focus on what you're doing with everything.
Right. And so what the problem lies when most people actually start a new health plan or weight loss program, and they want to work out more, but then they're told to eat less. And so then you don't, like, that's what we're talking about. You don't have enough energy to recover from your workouts, to build more muscle, which is very important for weight loss too, but also to support the thyroid. So coming back around to the thyroid, your thyroid's going to slow down and it's going to stop converting. Again, another indication of high cholesterol can be that your hormones are not converting from T4 to T3. So that, again, that's going to make it much harder for you to lose weight. That's why these tests, going back to these tests, they are very important. And so body temperature and pulse. So let's talk a little bit about pulse too, and we'll come back around to what the measurements mean. So circulation, I mean, we've all been told that low pulse is healthy, right? To be honest with you, it's taken out of context, because we're talking about athletes and we're talking about a low pulse being healthy. And when you talk about an athlete is trained to have a low pulse. They're training their body. Their thyroid's pretty low too. I mean, most athletes' thyroids are going to be low because they've trained their body to be able to handle this stress. And so their body slows down to become more efficient, especially if they're like an endurance athlete or something. But that doesn't necessarily mean that a low pulse is healthy.
If you think about the Chinese Eastern medicine. It's very influenced by how pulse is read, and the chi and everything is through taking the radial pulse and reading how fast and how slow, and it's called the breath of life in some ways because of where it's sending information to what's going on. And one of the things is if you're low tissue metabolism, that means you're high adrenaline, which means more constriction on the blood vessels themselves, because they are becoming restricted because of oxygen's not exchanging, things are slowing down. And so your circulation is going to start to close off to the peripheral because it's trying to save your heart, your brain, the things that it knows is going to keep you alive. So it's like if you were to go up to Mount Everest and have hypothermia, it is going to shut off the farthest extremities, and that's where people will have cold hands, cold feet. And if you can know that your pulse was never supposed to be in the 50s or the 60s ever, and it's really based on the fact that like you said, it's out of context. It is health is not synonymous with fitness, because fitness has a different meaning for each person that's in their field. And what we're doing is we're trying to take a whole big image of fit people that have these rock abs or these successful athletic stories, but the part of it is that it doesn't mean that they're healthy. They're just fit for their exercise.
Right.
And if you look at a baby does not have a slow pulse. It comes out.
That's very true. Yeah.
It comes up with a high pulse, even in the hundreds. And there is no worry about having a child that come out with a high pulse. It actually is, that's how we come through. We're supposed to have this because it means the body is circulating, fresh blood is moving through the body. It's heating the system, and it's going through the body, and its pathways are not inhibited. And so when you take your pulse, you're really seeing how much time is taking like in a window of seeing, like your circulation is seeing if you're getting enough heat through your extremities. And if you're not, then your pulse is going to be very low, and that means that it's not able to take in oxygen. It's not able to convert the CO2, and your cells are suffocating. So that's why you get edemas. That's why you get water retention, especially women who have high estrogen in their ankles, in their limbs.
Mm-hmm.
They get the saggy arms. They get the white, the whiteness of the skin, where it's very
you see the veins kind of. Yeah. And I think it's an indication that you're basically your oxygen transporter, which is CO2, is not, you're not having enough CO2 production. And so then there's enough oxygen isn't getting transported to the tissues. And so therefore, if your oxygen isn't getting transported to the tissues, then your nutrients aren't getting transported to the tissues. So the circulation is a really good indication that you aren't getting your nutrients to your tissues. So you're just
so think about
stagnant, I guess.
Sludgy blood or high iron content is because the body is literally like a river drying up. It does not have the fluidity that it needs. The vasoconstriction, all of that is showing up, saying this river is slowly drying. We're going to cut the circulation off here. And that's where you get diabetics who have feet issues, where people have problems with arthritis because they're not getting enough nutrients into their joints. So array of issues, fibromyalgia, you're getting into MS, you're getting all of the autoimmune system issues that people have that come up because they really are based on a low metabolic rate.
Even like neurological, possibly it could be. Yeah. So
Parkinson's and dementia.
Because if you're not getting good blood flow, then I guess it's not getting to the brain, correct? So that would make a lot of sense. So with that, so we kind of know now we're putting together what, our temperature, how important to know what our body temperature is, how important it is to know what our pulse is. If you are watching, I'm just going to do a little demonstration of how to take your pulse, because a lot of people actually ask me that. They don't know how. And really, the best way that I've found, I know some people do it on the wrist, but I prefer actually the carotid artery, which is a neck. So you take two fingers, if you can see me, and you slide it down the neck into that like divot area. It should feel a little bit of a divot there. And you should feel a really strong pulse. And I would hold it for 10 seconds, count how many beats you get in 10 seconds, and you can multiply that by 6. The other way you can do it is you can just hold your fingers there and count how many beats you get in 1 minute. And either way, I've done it both ways and it usually comes out the same. Might you usually do it on your neck, or do you usually hold
I
your
usually do the
wrist?
wrist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I always felt like the neck, just I could feel it just much more strongly on the neck. But if you'd rather do it on your wrist, you can do that. Use the same two fingers, not your thumb, of course, and that would go with the temperature. And so, of course, we talked about a digital thermometer is the easiest, fastest way to take your temperature, and you would do that orally.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about what it means to take your temp in the morning and after your meal. So one of the reasons why the temperature in the morning and pulse in the morning, temperature and pulse are perfect for the morning is because you're coming out of hibernation, and cortisol is really pumping through your system to wake you up from the night. And your histamine has kind of been masked over by the cortisol, so that you're getting into stress hormones that are kind of signaling you to go eat and get in, you start your functioning of the day. And when your temperature is low or your pulse is low, that means you're starting your day off with a very low burning mechanism. Like basically your oven isn't working, and so everything you take in is going to be a struggle because it has to have energy to break down. It means digestion may be off. You might have a headache when you wake up, or you might have crazy dreams. You might have things where you don't feel good, things that would make you kind of feel sluggish for the day. And that's, you need to run and get some coffee. You need to have, not to say coffee's bad, just saying that there's a combination of what's driving the engine, right? You're really focusing on how your temperature is working versus what if you're living off of stress hormones. So let's talk about the low temp in the morning.
Okay.
Falls after eating breakfast, which is basically saying that you wake up in the morning with a low temp, and then you eat your breakfast, and then the temp falls. So that means stress, hyperthyroidism. The meal is having an effect on you, even because it's hard for you to digest the food. Then low temp in the morning, and it doesn't change after eating breakfast. It means you may not have eaten the right things, sugar, protein, because the liver needs the sugar to create the T3 and warming of the body, right?
Right.
So then you can have low pulse in the morning, and then the pulse rises after eating, which then is like T3 increasing because you're eating carbs and increasing your energy, and the blood is circulating more. Most premenstrual women may have a less pulse, especially around their periods, because the estrogen is higher, and so the thyroid has to work a little bit harder to deal with the excess estrogen in the cycle. And really what you're looking for is that your temperature and pulse are warming your body after your meal and giving you that energy. So your temperature really wants to go up. Your pulse should be going up. And if these
Yeah.
things aren't happening, now you can have high temperature and low pulse, which means that you're still having some energy insufficiencies. You're not producing enough T3. You could have the reverse, high pulse, low temperature, which means you're still being adrenalized. The meal maybe was too much protein for you to process.
There's many
And
variations. Well, is real quick. I just wanted to tell everybody what a normal body temperature would be like, between 97.8 to 98.6, in that range. Really, preferably 98, I think, to 98.6. But sometimes when people come up from the 96s and come up to 97, close to 98, I'm like, yeah, that's great. You're doing a great job. And then of course 37 degrees Celsius if you're using Celsius. But I mean, and the pulse normal would be about 84 to 90 beats per minute in the middle of the day or after breakfast. And then in the morning, first thing when you wake up, obviously you're going to have a lower temperature and a lower pulse too, which I think normal is in the 97s for waking up, and your pulse would be probably mid 70s, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely in that range. If you're going past 70, you're having a problem. You're having a lot of more stress hormones than you want in your body. And then I think because if you look at how often your resting heart rate versus your normal heart rate and how it's supposed to kind of change as you get up vertically, that part is the quickening of that too. So if you start with a really low pulse, you might have dizziness, or you might feel like a hypoglycemic kind of feeling, jittery, or some kind of vertigo or something in the mornings, because the body is having to pump energy to get you up, right?
Yeah. And interestingly enough, there's those kind of symptoms are symptoms of hypoglycemia, and the easiest fix for that is to eat food, right? So,
Carbohydrates,
yeah. Like
and
what? Like juice,
balancing your protein.
eggs, and
Yeah, and I want to mention, like, one of the things that happens when people eat protein, especially with eggs, and this eat them without it, it stimulates an insulin secretion, and then what you're going to have is then the high adrenaline effect, and the blood sugar will drop, and you'll have an increase a need for carbohydrates. So definitely eat eggs with orange juice to balance out the protein that you're eating. You need the protein with the vitamin A to hit the cholesterol, and it's just a part of the process. But if you are over proteinizing yourself, especially in the morning, you're going to really adrenalize yourself again.
right. And that's great to know. Yeah. Well, I mean, to reiterate, kind of what we're saying, your morning temperature and pulse is your baseline measurement for your metabolic health at rest, is basically what we said. Normal temperature and pulse pattern will start off in the low range in the morning, peak midday, and then decline at night. So it will go back down as you get into the nighttime. And I don't always tell people to check it at night, but definitely if you want to, you can. That's, I think it sometimes is good to check that too, if you're curious about it. After breakfast, your temperature and pulse should increase and remain constant, with a slight increase without dropping until you peak midday. If your numbers drop or do not go up, this could indicate you're experiencing blood sugar instability, like what Maya just talked about. So our goal with everybody is to see a gradual increase from where you started with your initial baseline measurement in the morning, or in general, like what you first started with, even the first day you took it. I usually ask people just to take it before they change anything in their diet, and to see where they are starting and then compare it to that. We talked about adrenaline and cortisol, but also exercise. So you may not want to take it right after you exercise, because it will increase your body temperature, obviously, and your pulse, keeping them elevated for extended period of time. So give yourself a minimum of 30 minutes to recover and normalize post-exercise before taking your readings, as well as if you're on your period or if you're sick, take those into consideration, because obviously if you're running a fever, you're going to have a higher temperature. And then if you've got more estrogen, like Maya said, it's going to be different too. So
your cycle is going to enhance the kind of change the readings. Also remember that when you take your temperature, give it enough time after eating something hot or cold. The mouth temperature will change after having been heated by or cooled by something that you've eaten. So to check calories per day, the water evaporation should be kind of looked at. So if you want to you should be taking like 2 quarts more fluid a day than you lose in urine. So that means, because if you're retaining too much water, the thyroid isn't working. Like a lot of people tend to say they don't sweat, right?
Right.
And when
Yeah,
you
I was hearing
exercise,
if you don't sweat or you sweat too much, those are both equal problems, right?
sweating is, I think, is like also an adrenaline aspect. But I think people who don't sweat at all have low thyroid, because their
Yeah.
temperature and core isn't allowing, even when you're in exercise mode, when you are forcing your heart rate up, is not even getting your body to do what it's naturally supposed to do and perspire to keep the heat. So, because it's just basically it's just getting a warming aspect, but it's not heating you and allowing your skin to breathe and do what it needs to do to
Right. To
get
cool
rid of
itself,
cool
basically.
itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So it holds the heat, kind of is trying to hold the heat in, is what it sounds like, because you're not really able to heat it naturally or with the thyroid as much. Maybe is that why that's happening? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not in the way that it sounds like, oh yeah, I've heated my house and, I,
Yeah.
heat protection and I keep the heat in and I keep the cold in. Really what it's happening
Um,
is the body is still stressing, but so it's not like you're getting free energy. You're actually like bottlenecked up with the body saying, okay, you're heating me, you're stressing me out, but I have no outflow of this energy. It's all just being
right. Yeah. Oh my God.
retained.
Yeah.
And so the fluid stays in the body even more
Oh man.
because you're not perspiring.
Yeah. That makes sense, actually. I never really understood that till now. Thank you, Maya.
Yeah. Think right.
So, yeah, right? Yeah. So, hopefully that made sense to everybody. And we just wanted to introduce that to everybody. I know it might be a very foreign concept for some of you guys, but so if you do have any questions, feel free to head over to our Facebook page. One thing I just want to say real quick is I have a workshop coming up in June 10th in Portland, Oregon. It's called Treat Your Hiking Feet. It's going to be with Pamela Siri of delightfulyoga.com. We're going to do a whole workshop on feet. She's going to do a yoga class about feet. She's going to teach everybody some reflexology. She's going to teach you a few things about, the anatomy of your feet. I'm also going to talk about feet, hips, and knees and how you can keep them mobile. And we're also going to talk about eyes and how that helps with the proprioception in your feet and vice versa, and all kinds of fun things. And then I'm gonna do a small nutrition talk and talk about some of the things we talked today about hormonal grounding and through food as well as physiological feedback. And then our lunch is gonna be catered by Dick's Primal Burger, and you guys get a choice between grass-fed burger. We also have some, actually, in my opinion, very healthy vegetarian and vegan options. It's their burgers, they're vegetarian and vegan burgers are made from mushrooms. So, and they also have gluten-free buns and food sensitivity. It's also food sensitivity friendly, if I can say that. I can barely get that out. Food sensitivity friendly. So anyway, it's going to be awesome. If you guys want to take part in that, it's going to be June 10th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And we're going to go on a beautiful hike in Oaks Bottom Wildlife Refuge. And we're meeting in Selwood Park. So check it out. It's on pureenergypdx.com. You can go to the events tab and sign up there, and feel free to email me if you have any questions. Thank you guys so much for listening today. Definitely feel free to check us out on Facebook, on our Facebook page, Integrate Yourself Podcast Community, as well as check Maya out on mayagottlieb.com and check me out on pureenergypdx.com. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk to you again next time. Thank you so much for listening to Integrate Yourself, a podcast about integrating all aspects of health into your life. Hopefully, you found the general information in this podcast today informative and helpful, but it's not intended to replace medical advice and should not be used as such.